The Klingon batleth is a weapon that, in my opinion, falls into a type of category of weapons that are... You could get some measure of use out of them, but they are not optimized to be a truly practical weapon, which is the way I gauge if a weapon is good or bad. Now, not everyone gauges weapons on that scale. A lot of people just gauge it on, can it be an effective weapon? Could you do damage? Is it lethal? Is it somewhat usable in combat? And on that metric, yes, the Klingon batleth is a functional weapon, and I will even give it the charity that I think it is more functional and deadly a weapon than, say, the nunchuck, than, say, a rock, and even a ladder. I guess it depends who uses it, because Jackie Chan really made the ladder look like a hugely effective weapon. And I have it here just for that demonstrative point. Just because a rock increases your lethality and it has a level of use as a weapon, same with nunchucks, okay, doesn't necessarily mean it is a good weapon when there are so many other options that are just vastly superior to it, especially if there are significant drawbacks and limitations either to its design, its utility, are there redundant elements on it. And so in this video, we're going to analyze the batleth again, but also with an additional element to it. We're going to point out some of the limitations that I feel exist with this weapon, which make it genuinely a bad weapon, even though you could get some measure of use out of it. But then we are going to see if we can improve it. Can we fix the batleth to keep many of its kind of core aesthetic principles, even some of the elements of its design, but make it a truly functional weapon that might be comparable, make it even near equivalent to a regular sword?
My ears are tingling, Shad, because I already disagree with things that you've said. First off, when it comes to comparing weapons, there's context that needs to be observed. Let me put it this way. First off, any force multiplier is, in most cases, 99% of the time, better than no force multiplier.
But my counter to that is always, if the bare, I guess, only redeeming quality of the weapon is that it's better than nothing.
I didn't say that. I'm just saying that's the first, that's the base layer.
Because if that's the only thing people say, it's better than nothing.
No. The next layer is how you compare a weapon to determine whether it is a useful weapon or not. First off, something like this. What category do you put this in?
It's a bladed weapon.
So, yeah, okay. What do you pair this against? What do you fight against this with? Because this is where the most important part is. Because if you say this is terrible against, I don't know, like a war sword, well, okay, sure.
Long sword as well.
Okay,
even
sure.
arming sword.
Okay, well, they're both terrible against a gun. It's always about what you pair things against, where the context matters.
Yeah, but pairing it against other melee bladed weapons is perfectly adequate. Perfectly fair.
But that's like me saying, well, I have a knife, you have a sword, this knife is now trash. It's always about the context of what you're comparing things to.
The question is, right, in terms of, all right, let's nail it down. Okay. Weapons of similar size and weight?
Sure.
That's the fair comparison?
That would be the closest, because it's such a weird fantasy weapon. First off, I like it. Like, no, I'm not talking about functionality. The look of it. It looks cool, man.
I think that's why a lot of people like it. It has this cool, visceral look.
It's fantasy.
Yeah.
But it's not like, completely terrible. Well, can you...
Really? I mean, I see a lot of Mall Ninja-ish, Spike-ish kind of cool factor to it, that when you analyze it practically, there's a lot of redundancies to it.
Well, then let's analyze it practically. First off, I have reach. Not only that, I have a nice hook.
Yeah, but also, look at the weight that you have in front of your hand versus the weight I have in front of my hand.
True, but this is one of the things that I actually think would be kind of okay with it. This is a nice forward-facing curve, meaning when I hit you with one of these points, it's going to do some real damage.
I actually think these double-ended up points will have the Wolverine claw effect and reduce the penetrative power.
I don't think so.
Oh, yeah?
I think there might, depending how large your target area is.
The double spike is useless on this design.
Because they're not perfectly in line, I think you will hit one first. Don't get me wrong, I do agree that you will have a chance at some point of both of them sharing that surface area, but I also think If you concentrate on one of them, you will do a bit of damage.
But wouldn't you agree there is literally no functional reason to have both of those spikes? You would get every use and deadly ability out of just having one?
I like it as a... Again, we're getting into it.
I think there's a point there.
There is a... This is hard to evaluate because steel is slippery, we know this, but I do think that there is a catching a blade. Yes.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Well, this is wood, that's steel, yes. But there is definitely a mechanic there of catching that blade.
I reckon even if you try to torque it as much as you can, we've tested this multiple times with the crown,
The difference is my hand is exposed, sure, but my hand being here for that leverage point means I can torque this way. That's a lot of torque. This is plywood, chat. You're not proving a point there. This is plywood.
I am doubtful. We're going to have a discussion about this and then look at what I think could be improved upon it.
I want to make this
But
clear.
ultimately, I will ask you, if you had the choice between that and nearly any other weapon, functional weapon that's already been tried, true, tested, right? Is there any realm where you would pick that over it?
That's a complicated question. No, and the reason why is because when I look at this, I'm searching in my brain for transferable skills. What weapon would I closely...
An axe.
Maybe?
An axe is... because this is the other big problem with this weapon. It's weight. I don't think people understand or truly comprehend what it is. First, there is a canonical weight, and then there's a practical weight. Both are redonkulous, in all honesty.
We spoke about this off camera, and I think we both can agree it's just riders not knowing anything.
The canonical weight, and we'll show you the clip, is I think 5.3 or 5 point something kilos.
Computer, I want a Klingon batleth, tip to tip 116 centimeters, weight 5.3 kilos.
It's over 5 kilos in weight.
Yeah.
We have tried to use a weapon that was close to that, like I think it was 4 kilos.
Something like
it was the crazy polearm dowel thing, and that nearly broke our friggin' backs.
It was wieldable though. Like,
it's not a practical weapon. We trashed it because it was so
A lot of
practical.
people actually comment on that video not understanding, because 5 kilos isn't a lot of weight. The difference
when
is...
you swing it around?
Well, even when you swing it around, it's not that much weight. The difference is you can get the exact same amount of destructive power from a weapon that is way lighter, which means you get less fatigue. That's why weight is so important. When we said that in the video, we didn't actually caveat. So people are like, 5 kilos, that's nothing. It's like, technically yes, but with a weapon...
Oh, but they don't, like, all right, hold out 5 kilos on a big, long pole and see how long you can do it. When you start swinging around 5 kilos, no, good luck, okay?
It's doable, but why would you...
You will exhaust yourself so quickly.
Why
and
would you do it when you don't need to? That's the point there.
But so, the canonical weight, purely just right then, makes this a dog crap weapon, okay? But the functional weight, if this was made out of steel, would be closer to 3 kilos, I reckon. 2.5 to 3 kilos. If it was steel, because look, I mean, compare it. The steel is nearly, it's 2.5 to 3 times as much steel on this as opposed to this blade. And
I reckon this is a weapon that you don't actually need the whole thing made out of steel, though.
But they are, though. We're talking about the actual canonical batleth.
Sure.
Or then we'd use the canonical weight. If we were to try and give it every charity possible, and by the way, this is not charity that is granted to it in canon, its canonical weight is over 5 kilos. That alone has made this one of the worst weapons you could, like, it's unwieldable now. And that's not because Klingons are supposed to be stronger. In canon, Klingons are actually just as strong as humans.
The Klingons are as diverse a people as any. Some of them are strong and some of them are weak.
But let's pretend Star Trek futuristic technology, they have a lightweight, very strong composite material that actually makes it as light as this wooden one now.
Sure.
Even then, I think it's a profoundly unoptimized, if somewhat functional weapon that still doesn't justify its design when you would just pick another more optimized, streamlined design like a regular sword.
Sure. But I want to make this clear. I don't think this is on the level of nunchucks and stuff.
I agree.
Think that this
is not as bad as nunchucks.
It's a little
not as
wonky,
bad as...
It's a little complicated. It's really hard to find a transferable skill to it. But in a general sense, I think if you actually wanted to practically use this, I reckon you could find a way.
Yeah, you could. There's still more limitations and impracticalities around it and redundancies in the design, but I mentioned that in the intro, I don't think it is as bad as nunchucks, but it still falls into that category that it's a more impractical weapon that you can make work. You will get a level of functionality and more function than nunchucks, granted. But, and this is with the caveat that it's super light material. We're in fantasy now, okay? Because even if you were to make this in real world materials, the weight makes that comparison. Actually, it might even be as bad as nunchucks because of too unwieldy, okay?
Sure.
All right? But if we had the fantasy material, you could get some measure of function out of it. But in terms of the summary of its poor design, redundant spike, completely unneeded. If this was just a single blade, you would actually get much better cutting capacity out of it. I am not sold on this, the bottom end spike in terms of as a dual kind of slashing weapon. Makes it even worse because you're now cut your reach in half, and it's like, oh, you can block like that. Yeah, you could block like blocking two-handed. Pointless as well, all right? The most functional use out of this weapon is actually use it more like a conventional axe, but then it's an unwieldy, overly heavy axe. Yeah, you got maybe a pummel close-in strike with the back-end blade, but that does not justify this configuration by any means. And then there's another issue, Tyranth. Mm-hmm. How much success have we had with cutting with inverse blades?
Complicated subject.
Complicated subject.
Yes, it is.
They usually cut worse and they're more difficult to cut with.
They're more difficult to cut with because of how the geometry is, but in terms of like the destructive power, I'll put it, they are better than a regular sword because you can, all of that energy focuses more on singular points rather than spreading over.
You're kind of focusing on just the spike part, but in terms of general cutting from an inverse curve.
Yeah,
like, we did the reverse edge katana, which is basically an inverse curved katana, and that sucked.
Yes. I recently revisited it, and it wasn't too terrible, actually. Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't
It was still issues.
There are still issues, but there's like trade-offs with everything. Mm-hmm. With this one, I think it wouldn't be as terrible as you might think. What would actually concern me more is where the cutting surface is. Because off the top of my memory, I can't remember where the cutting surface is. Is it all here and here?
They usually try and hit here, but then that's where you have the issue of the double spike. Because even if this hits first, it's going to penetrate to a point where the next spike hits, and that's going to stop it completely.
Yeah.
All right? The double spike is dumb. It's redundant. It's not needed at all. If this was just a single blade, just that is a single small improvement, that if this was just a blade in a single spike on either end, it would be a vastly better weapon and design right off the bat.
I still think it might have some blade trapping capabilities.
The blade trap, I highly doubt it.
The reason why I say that is because usually when you do some sort of blade catching on anything, usually you're far away from that leverage point. Mm-hmm. With this, you can be right there and you can torque this big thing, you can torque that a lot more than just like a regular blade. But
see, the angle, it's not going inwards. There's a slide out point. As you start talking it and you have even any measure of kind of like, it's not really trapping because it's not hooking the blade in. And so I can easily just slide it out on that end without anything blocking it. And then there's another issue that we need to be actually honest about it. That's a two-handed weapon. It's not a one-handed weapon.
You're asking the wrong person about that, man.
No, come on. It is as much as a one-handed weapon as a regular longsword is a one-handed weapon. Can you use it in one hand? Yes. Most people, universally,
that's why I said you're
will be
asking
using
the wrong
it
person for that.
Two-handed. And you have to agree with me, though, and that's proven in the lore and the canon, two hands.
Yes.
And so now let's compare reach. Two-handed to two-handed. Night and day. Come on, night and day, especially if I was like this. And then the maneuverability that I have over this blade versus what you have over that, it becomes a non-contest. A sword, especially something like a longsword, is a vastly, and I mean vastly superior, optimized, designed weapon that if you were to pick, if you ever were to try and pick weapons, right, and you had nearly any other weapon of similar size and configuration from the traditional roster, right, barely anyone would ever pick a batleth over something else. Swords have better utility in terms of wearability, versatility, close confines. It's a better sidearm. Is there any situation where that is superior to any other weapon of similar size? You can't wear it easier?
Yeah, you can't wear this one. This one is
It's trash. It is not better than an axe for armor. It's not better than a war pick or war hammer or Lucian hammer. It is. You cannot find a functional traditional weapon that you would pick the batleth over.
Guys, Shad sprung this video on me, so I had no time to even go through like
He knows I'm right.
a thought experiment with it. So I am not on my game. Because I reckon if I had time, I could come up with something, but you're putting me on the spot, and I'm like, I don't know.
He knows I'm right. But here's the thing. We're not giving up. We're not giving up on the batleth, Tyranth.
The thing is, I refuse to believe that a weapon like this, with multiple angles, large cutting surface, and a design that should lend itself to really driving itself up, there's not a use to it.
Well, guess what? There are uses to it, but it is not optimized or efficient, and there are ways to fix it. I already mentioned one way, right? If you were to make this a single-bladed spike with no separation, right? And you could even get rid of this bottom one and only have this single bottom spike here for the reverse thing, you already have a weapon that I think is twice as more functional as this design here. Where it is made to be like most people use a batleth like this when you really want to use it. In the show they will do this, but this is like if you fight like this versus anything with greater reach, if half your reach in half, you're screwed. Like this is a sucky way to fight with this weapon. All right. Same with good example, quarterstaffs. How often do people fight quarterstaff? Double-handed versus one. They do it sometimes, but mostly people use quarterstaff with the longer end forward to maximize reach. Same way with the logical way that you fight with this. And then if you're going to fight like that, there's no point with it being symmetrical. Optimize its configuration for that. Get rid of this useless spike. You can have this bottom one here. And in actual fact, guess what, Tyranth? I've already made one. We'll get there though, because we're not giving up on the batleth. I want to actually discuss, is one of the problems with the batleth the fact that it's so small? It's only 116 centimeters. Let's compare it with an upgraded version. Now that's a bigger batleth. By the way, completely non-canonical in size. This is ridiculous in size.
Yeah, I'm actually less sold on this one.
Really? You think that?
Because even if we had some nice lightweight material, even with this is plywood, this still has too much weight on it, on that edge.
It depends where you hold it. You're holding it down here. If you hold it up here, and remember, this is meant to be a two-handed weapon.
Sure.
And then maybe you could actually do some double action because it's a pole arm now, right? This is a pole arm. And so you could actually, start working it like that. This is already a vastly superior weapon to the canonical.
But it's only superior because you've just added a bunch of reach.
Yeah, you're right. It still has the issues of the double spike redundancy. Look, in terms of additional handholds up the blade, I don't mind. I'm not sure just a giant version of the same design redeems the batleth. I still think there's a lot of criticisms that we raise that still exist with it. And then with the added weight, hugely unfunctional, but again, pretending magical materials. So let me go get my redesigned batleth. Here it is. I probably made it too big. So you have to try and analyze it with the caveat that consider a smaller version of this as well. But there's a couple of clear design principles I've put in place here.
Sure, it's a sword though. I feel like that's what we're just going to. Yeah,
but it has certain batleth classical elements it's still in. For instance, 3 handholds, and this can actually be with a sword this big, having those additional handholds can be really good. You can half sword it essentially and keep your hand protected. So we got that, all right? If you wanted to use it like an axe, this is now more justified in terms of armor piercing ability, okay? The main cutting blade is a regular curve. It's not inverse curved, which means draw cutting action, and it'll cut vastly better than one with an inverse curve. And it has the bottom spike that you can do the reverse, jab with. And it actually keeps a lot of the DNA of a batleth, but it is vastly more functional, and you can even have a smaller version that's like it'll still be vastly better.
You've just made a sword. You've made a skeletonized sword.
Yeah, that's what it should be.
Okay, so then that's not a batleth.
It's better than swords are better than a batleth.
Because I do think that this design would be more functional, but it's also like twice as big.
But even a smaller one, even if there was one the same size as this, you could agree it's a more functional, versatile weapon.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm still like there's some caveats here with this bit here. I think you have too much weight, and the moment you make contact with something like this, you are running the risk of snapping your blade.
I don't think so at all, because we have blades that thin that hold up fine.
With all of this weight here.
Yeah, I reckon it'll be
and
fine.
That striking capacity, if you hit here.
Well, hang on. Are we dealing with the sci-fi material thing?
You tell me, man.
We are. If the sci-fi material justifies being able to have this hold its structure, then it translates.
Because I do think as a design, it is better.
Thank you.
You've got way more reach, obviously. On top of that, you do have this, so you can bring that
Isn't
down.
that cool?
I do like that functionality, sure. Is there a reason why it's curved single-edged?
Yes.
Why?
Cutting capacity. A curved blade like that, you can draw the blade all the way down. You have a much wider and longer cutting ratio, which means more threat range. And we have seen, like, especially on a big curve like that, Tyranth, there's going to be some cuts in which you get caught in the material because of that forward spike. Where this, you would always be able to draw it out.
Sure. The reason why I mention this is because one of the biggest issues we had with our Nodachi was gravity, especially with an aggressive curve like this, wants to pull that blade out of edge alignment all the time. Even with a sci-fi material, having just something this long with any mass is going to just want to go like that.
But you could easily make this a little shorter, and then you don't have to deal with that nearly as much.
Maybe.
Yep.
It's very thick.
Look, it is thick, but I think you could even make this easily 1/3 shorter, maybe even half, and you're still dealing with a vastly more functional weapon than the batleth.
Sure. So today's episode will probably be titled
Shad was right.
I fixed the batleth.
I fixed
Not because he wants to explore the batleth, he just wants to make it his own version.
No, well, there are issues with it.
So
I'm addressing legitimate concerns. This is a design that addresses all the problems I've raised with the batleth.
I just refuse.
And it still keeps the DNA of what a batleth, like you can, still get the spike, you can still, you got the 3 handholds, it's got that Klingon feel to it as a result.
Sure.
Thank you.
I don't know what you want me to say. I just refuse to believe that a weapon like this that should have so much versatility on paper, in the real world, there's just no practical use. I
didn't say it has no practical use. I said you would never pick it over another weapon when you have other options that are practical and functional. Is there any situation where you would use it over a sword or an axe or...
Because over a short sword, I reckon I would.
Just for leverage and greater power.
Over an arming sword,
but that's
I probably would.
That's just picking a long sword over a short sword for the same reason, essentially. Bigger, more leverage, more damage.
Sure. But even against something like...
Oh, we're now similar size. That's the
what I'm
caveat.
saying.
Yeah.
Even something like a longsword, I do think that there's more destructive capability here. I'm just not 100% sure how I would implement it right now.
More destructive capability. That one is a big maybe. You need to test that to find out if, like...
It's really hard to find real batleth. I've looked. Shocker. They're hard to get.
Especially in Australia.
There's something here. I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it, but I know there's something there.
I can give this kind of caveat, right? If you were fighting, but the justification is if you didn't have any other better option. That's the reality, right? Like, if I was fighting someone in heavy armor, okay, and I only had a long sword, I could see myself picking up a big, chunky stick, which we see in medieval art. People sometimes are using a clubbed weapon, a stick, over the sword they have at their hip because they're fighting an armored opponent. But the reason is that they couldn't get access to an axe or a mace or anything better that was optimized for it. And so, yeah, there are situations where I would probably pick that because it's better combating armor, say, right? If I didn't have any other better option. But that means it is not,
But that's such a broad statement. That applies to everything. That's like saying, yeah, if I had the Beck there, I would choose that against an armored opponent against a sword. Like, sure, that's how scaling works with weapons. I don't think it's completely useless. I think there's something
I don't think it's completely useless either. I've given that acknowledgement.
Sure.
I'm just more critical of weapons that... And I guess this is the big difference. People gauge weapons on different scales. I am more critical of poorly optimized functional weapons. They're still functional, but they're not optimized. They have big problems with them. And then in my mind, that makes it a bad weapon.
Could this be optimized more? Of course.
Yes.
Sure. But if we're taking, because it is a fantasy weapon, we take fantasy weapons and then we try and make them real. I think it's not that bad.
It's not as bad as nunchucks.
Oh, yeah.
I can give it that.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? All right.
Don't blindside me with videos like this that I'm not prepared for.
You just got to roll with the punches.
No, Shad just wants to look smart while I'm just waking up.
That's an excuse, Tyranth. Imagine this was a bit smaller to be a more comparable situation. Is there any situation in which you would pick the batleth over this design?
Probably not.
I take that as a win. Thank you for watching. Check out my other video right there. Hope to see you there.